Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and by popular demand, we are back with another episode of Battle of the Brackets. We have myself, Chris, we have George, we have Tate, we have Al, and our judge today is Naomi, and we are arguing it out for Best Rivalry, just shy of our 4-year anniversary on the channel, which is... I can't believe the years have gone by that quickly. Technically, tomorrow is our anniversary, but what better way to celebrate our anniversary than our favorite show on the channel? This is, we've said it again and again, our favorite channel, our favorite show to do on the channel, and yeah, this is going to be a good one. We've had a few people, myself included, saying that we're dreading this one today. We're not feeling confident, and those are always the best battles to just, fly by the seat of your pants and just go for it. So I guess passing over to George on this one to talk a little bit more about the bracket.
Yeah, so for this one, we are doing Best Rivalry, which is what we've said. It's new. It's something we've not ever done, so it should be on screen share now. We basically we're going to be arguing for the best rivalry. This could be a hero v villain. This could be for a common goal. This could be anything. So I'm going to go through the picks as usual. I'm going to try and remember half the names. I probably won't be able to. So first up, we have From There Will Be Blood. Daniel Plainview and no, it's not Daniel Plainview.
Yeah, Daniel Plainview.
Daniel Plainview and Eli as a rivalry. Then we've got Derek Zoolander and Hansel for obviously best male model. Which is my pick. Then we've got Blade Runner, which is Chris's, which is Deckard and Roy against Owl's two Spinal Tap picks. I'm sorry, I don't know the characters' names. I know you texted me them earlier when I asked. I've forgotten them already. We've got Gimli and Legolas from Lord of the Rings against not Drogon. Bloody hell, that was Game of Thrones references there. We've got Rocky and Drago. No, the Drago. I'm sorry, there's been way too much Game of Thrones. We've got Director Krennic and Tarkin, who can't fit in the photo because they were shared a shot together from Rogue One. We've got the two average Joes and is it Cobra Jim from Dodgeball?
Yes.
We've got from the Prestige Batman and Wolverine. We've got them up against Jack Sparrow and Captain Barbossa from Pirates of the Caribbean, Harry Potter, Lord Voldemort, Charles and Magneto from X-Men. From Jingle All the Way, we have the Sinbad and Arnie, with the Postman and the Father. We've got Back to the Future, which is George McFly and Biff. We've got
actually, I said Marty McFly and Biff.
My bad. I will
go with that picture.
That picture will be just in Marty McFly and Biff. That's completely on me. We've got Rush. We've got Nicky Lauda, James Hunt, and then we've got the Mummy with Imhotep and George of the Jungle.
Okay.
I guess this is quite a topical one because we started this show right around the time of season 6 of Game of Thrones, and we're almost like 2 weeks off wrapping up season 8, like the final Game of Thrones. So this is going to be a good one. I don't know how it's going to play out. Usually we have like a thing that we have as a favorite that we think might win. I haven't got a clue where this is going to go today. I really, really don't. Now, as we said, like rivalry, we have kind of broadened the scope of what rivalry is. Usually it's something over a common goal, but we have opened it up more to like general sort of hero and villain. So for the rules, Tate, do you want to explain the time that we ask each people?
Sure. So we each get 1 minute for your argument per person, and then there is a 30-second rebuttal to follow. So you'll usually go person A 1 minute, person B 1 minute, person A 30 seconds, person B 30 seconds. We then have the 3 people who are not fighting in that round will vote on who they want to go through to the next round. And as we move throughout the competition into the final round, the rules change again, but we'll explain that in a little bit later.
Awesome. So without further ado, oh, by the way, people, if you're watching at home, let us know some of your favorite film rivalries and get talking all the way through the stream as we go on. It's about a 2-hour stream usually. And round 1, we have There Will Be Blood versus Zoolander. So I believe that's Tate and George.
Yep.
So I will man the time. Okay. Right. Who's up first? It's Tate, right?
Yep.
Okay. 1 minute on the clock. Are you ready, sir?
I am ready.
Okay. Go.
The rivalry between Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday does transcend the general kind of I don't like you, you don't like me, we're going for the same kind of common goal. This isn't just going for who is the best in, I don't know, fashion or whatever it is in Zoolander, trying to pretend that they're a better person in general. No, These two are fighting over a village worth of people, fighting over the respect from all the people who they work with on a daily basis. And within the rivalry, it changes hands on who's on top throughout the entire film. You have very intense scenes where Daniel Plainview is taking that big, harsh, brash response of shouting his way to different things working, making sure that the money talks, whilst Eli is all about the faith. He has his own motivations as well within that society and manipulates Daniel Plainview throughout the entire film. But it isn't just one of your general rivalries.
George, 1 minute, go.
I mean, you've spoke more about There Will Be Blood than I could remember from the 3 hours and that 1 minute, so there we go. It's not really a rivalry as such, yours. Daniel Plainview is always in control from the first minute to the last. That's the credit of Daniel Day-Lewis. That's how I feel about that film. He's wonderful. But you know what? Let's talk about Derek Zoolander, because this is a comedy that people just don't really talk about these days. Who wants to be the best male model? It's out of Zoolander and Hansel. Now, you talk about rivalries. Zoolander's won the best male model so many years in a row. He is usurped by Hansel, this up-and-coming, fresh young male model. And from the first moment, that creates this horrible dynamic of this competition trying to outdo each other. You've got David Bowie coming in to referee a walk-off between the two of them. That is far more interesting than anything that ever happened in There Will Be Blood. They're just trying to outdo each other, and this stupidity makes it so much enjoyable to watch, and that really does big up the rivalry. It's similar to Dumb and Dumber. Yes, there are some great moments, but they are bitter rivals to win, and they only have to team up to save the entirety of the male models.
30 seconds, Tayte, go.
You're right with the stupidity for your pick, definitely. But when you said that Daniel Plainview is always on top, he isn't. There's an entire scene dedicated to the baptism where he feels he's going to be gaining the power within the community by bringing faith into his life. Eli shuts him down. He slaps him in the face, makes him admit his guilt, makes him admit he hates his own son. And even at the very, very end of the film, it still plays on Daniel Plainview to the point where he has to murder his way to prove his point. It proves that Eli was right all the way throughout the entire film with the method that he went through with.
30 seconds, George, go.
I wouldn't say proves he was right. He was a sadistic old man that decided to beat the hell out of a kid with a bowling ball. And yes, it's a great scene, and Eli got what he deserves, but it doesn't spell a rivalry. It's like, thank God we've got to the end of this 3.5 hour film. Going back to Zoolander, it just keeps getting better and better, and you love it. Even when they become friends towards him, the rivalry still exists between them, trying to best themselves. It's always a game of one-upmanship, and that's far more better than a boring, baited out 3.5 hour piece. Give us an hour and a half. It hits the peak. We've got a walk-off on-off. Who's the best male model? It's so easily.
Okay, well, I mean, it's been 6 months since we last did one of these shows, but by God, we've still got it. Okay. I genuinely don't know where to go first on this one, so I'm going to open it up to, well, I guess it's Al, really, isn't it?
Okay. I think you both argued really well. I think George did a lot of attacking, but I don't think he argued for his film as much as Tayte argued for his film. That being said, I feel like Tayte perhaps didn't give me much of a sense of rivalry, just a case of the characters' friction with the murder and such. That being said, I'm going to have to just about give it to George, because he did really hammer home the point about the rivalry and the walk-off, and that's the whole point of the bracket, the rivalry. So, George, sorry.
I think George's hate for There Will Be Blood was very, very strong in this one.
But it isn't about the film, it's about the rivalry.
That's true. That's true. I'm just saying it's a sentiment that I also share. That being said, I'll completely agree with what Al just said there about that. I don't feel like, you know, Zoolander was defended enough, but also I don't feel that Zoolander was attacked enough by Tayte. I think you were both playing the defensive there quite a lot. What am I going to go for? I'm going to go with Tayte by a fraction, because I don't feel like I got much justification as to why like the rivalry and Zoolander being a fashion thing was better than that. I think Tayte went into a bit more angles with the characters. So I guess we pass over to Naomi on this one for the decider.
Great, on the decider on the first one.
For the first round.
Really, it does come down to the arguments for me, and I think with Tayte, you really didn't attack Zoolander enough, whilst George's attack mostly came from the hatred of the movie rather than any fault with the rivalry, excuse me. But at the same time, I feel like Tayte, to me at least, didn't explain the rivalry and why it was essentially the best in There Will Be Blood. And I've seen Zoolander. I do like it. I haven't seen There Will Be Blood. The sequel to Zoolander does ruin everything.
No, the second
that
one's
doesn't
good.
exist. So I think on those accounts, plus who can hate the walk-off with David Bowie? I mean, so George for me.
Okay, so Zoolander moves through to the next round. There Will Be Blood, we sadly have to say a goodbye to.
There has been blood, yeah.
It's now in the past tense.
Very, very quickly, I do want to say I love There Will Be Blood as a film, and it is a worthy watch if you want to watch a good film rivalry.
I'm still scarred from having to stay behind 4 or 5 minutes up to college to finish off.
Okay, so we move on to the next round, which is me with Blade Runner, Deckard and Roy Batty against, and again, I'm sorry, Al, I don't know the name of the two guys. I have seen...
David.
There we go. I have seen Spinal Tap, but like, I'll be damned if I can remember the character's name. So,
Okay, so Blade Runner is up first. Are you ready, Chris?
No, but we'll go with it anyway.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
This is without a doubt one of the best movie rivalries ever, in that you have two people on completely the opposite side of the coin. You have Deckard, who is out killing replicants. It's his job. It's been his job for years. He's wanted out of the game for long, but he's brought back into this scenario where he's got to take down these 4 replicants. And you've got Roy Batty, who is framed as the villain from the beginning, but inherently as you go through the movie, it's just a guy wanting to survive, wanting some life and wanting to experience life. And, you know, throughout the movie, you even have Deckard, who has these moments where he's conflicted on what he should do, but it's inherently his job. And he's a man of his word. He's a man of his oath. He will go to whatever ends to make sure that this job is completed through violent methods. He doesn't take pleasure from it. And because he has that detached sensibility with it, in that it is his job, that makes it all the more intriguing. And then you've got Roy Batty at the end, who, seeing that switch in the character in this rivalry, that he is also violent. They are both very violent people.
And stop. And Al, go.
I feel like you're arguing my case for me. He's been doing this for years. It's not really a rivalry. It's just one of many. And he's not even a real person. He's just a replicant. And he has no attachment to the person whatsoever. Nigel Tufnell and David St. Hubbins have been in a band together since they're about 9 years old. When you first open the film, the very opening credits with them on stage, they're both credited as lead guitar. And you can see from the off that they're brothers in arms. And the rivalry that comes up between them is an insidious rivalry that you see in little looks and little bits of cinematography, especially when Janine comes in, David's girlfriend, and you sense this building until Nigel finally quits the band. And at the very end, when he finally rejoins, you get this great sense of relief. It's a rivalry because they're fighting in some sense over their friendship, and they can't both of them win, because if one of them wins, they both lose. So in that sense, it is a rivalry. They're fighting their own egos and each other's egos, and they're fighting for their friendship in some way. So it is a rivalry, but it's a very different...
And stop, and rebuttal, go.
You use the word insidious rivalry there. I'd hardly call the rivalry in This Is Spinal Tap insidious. It is inherently just a band squabble, which is a dime a dozen. You see it with bands next to all the time, so it really isn't anything. And because it's done with that tongue-in-cheek comedic value, it lessens the impact. Blade Runner is one of the most groundbreaking films of all time, and the rivalry in that is testament to the acting on both sides and the interesting angle and depth you can read into both characters. Inherently a guy that just wants life, and a guy who's just trying to end that life because it's his job.
And stop, and go.
Absolutely not. They're best friends. You can tell from the very off that they love each other. There are interviews where they talk about growing up together, and there's a great deep love between them, a platonic friendship, and you can feel the tension start to rise. And it's not just a band squabble. I mean, they really are at loggerheads. It's very different from your movie, where it's just a guy fighting a guy who's not a real guy because it's his job.
Okay, and time.
Can you make a new segment on the show, like Al explains a movie in one sentence?
Oh,
I've seen that movie as well. I've actually bloody seen Blade Runner.
Bloody hell. Al's seen a movie.
And there will be blood, and it is shit.
It isn't shit. One of the greatest films of all time.
No, it's not.
I think this should be renamed to Everyone Shits on Tayte Film.
Yes, thank you.
I think in every bracket we have,
there's always one film.
One movie that Tayte loves. We had Amelie, we've had this, like...
It's usually my first pick. But
La La Land, yeah.
We'll never get the Amelie incident of greatest soundtracks.
That was
still an amazing
shocking
soundtrack.
That was
still an amazing soundtrack. No, it is still
anger.
an amazing soundtrack. But I made my decision up on this actually quite quickly. After the first argument, Al said a line in there, which kind of made me think, and I'm surprised he didn't go back to it and repeat the line during his rebuttal. But he just immediately came out the gates and said that Blade Runner wasn't personal. And with rivalries, the better the rivalry, in my head, you have to think that there has to be some form of personal attachment to it. Like for Roy Batty, it's just another Blade Runner hunting him down. Whilst with This Is Spinal Tap, I've never seen the film, but you made it feel more personal because you made it feel like they'd known each other since they were kids. They've had that build up, and suddenly it's bursting out because of arguments and fights. And because of that, I'm going to give the point to Al.
I am going to give the point to Chris. I thought Al had him until Chris said it's just another band squabble. They happen so much, and that just kind of. I mean, I haven't seen Spinal Tap, so I do have to admit that. But I thought that won it for me. There was kind of no comeback. Al had him on the ropes, but I think there was nothing past that. I think Chris has finished him.
Well, me and Naomi have seen This Is Spinal Tap, so...
And I'm down to the decider again.
How have you both not seen Spinal Tap?
Naomi, if you chime in earlier, you might not have to do the decider.
No, you've been polite.
What is being polite in Battle of the Brackets? I've never heard that before.
You're fucking about in the wrong show if you're going to be...
Okay, which way are you voting?
Oh, this is really difficult because as I said before the stream started, Spinal Tap is one of my ultimate favorite movies. I'm a music reviewer myself, and that kind of like insight into the whole band universe and just really looking into that kind of dynamic is something that I'm really interested in and something that I generally have as a job. However, as much as I love Spinal Tap, and I could easily talk about it for eons, Al, you had a fault when you started talking about their rivalry and said it was more like just their friendship and at odds with each other. And to be honest, it is more of them like exploring that long friendship as opposed to a actual rivalry. As much as you had the attack on Chris, which is more like a job that they had to do, I haven't seen Blade Runner. I know, shock horror.
What? Why have none of us seen any movies on this show today? Like,
Going well.
I have seen like the last scene of Blade Runner, and I've seen clips of it, and I know that it does become bigger than just a simple job. Whilst with Spinal Tap, it is more of that band dynamic, and having seen that for myself, you can get that kind of tension between bands, even with a long friendship, but it never really goes into a rivalry per se. So, gonna have to give it to Chris.
Okay, I thought I'd lost it there. Okay, so Blade Runner goes through to the next round. This next one, I'm really interested by. This is me fighting again, but we've got Al with Legolas and Gimli from the Lord of the Rings trilogy versus Rocky and Drago. I never thought I'd see this pairing in anything. So yeah, moving straight on to the next one. Al, are you ready? I'm not doing the time on this one.
Al, you're up first. Are you ready?
I'm first. Okay.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
So this rivalry is Legolas and Gimli. So I'm including the Lord of the Rings films and the Hobbit films. Because in the Hobbit films, you can see that Legolas has a lot of animosity towards dwarves and elves do generally. So we carry this when we see Lord of the Rings, and we know there's a lot of animosity between the two races. They don't get on from the very off. At the Council of Elrond, there's dirty looks between them. Never trust an elf. There's a lot of, let's be honest, weird looks between them, and they're not going to work on the same side, but they're kind of forced to come together. And through a series of fights and etc. And towards the end at Helm's Deep, they say they're friends, and it really is about the journey of these characters. It's not really just about destroying the ring, because the ring leaves at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. The next two movies is really about the development of these characters, and I think Legolas and Gimli do have a lot of character development. When Legolas asks Gimli,
And go.
Okay, we talk about detached rivalries. I don't think there's a more detached rivalry, than Legolas and Gimli. I mean, you're just told from the off and made to willingly accept from the beginning that dwarves hate elves. Why? You could probably go back to the books and read some lore, but that is it. That is the extent of their rivalry. What people remember more about Legolas and Gimli, and I love the trilogy, is their friendship. You don't really have many people talking about their rivalry. Rocky and Drago is a rivalry that has lasted for 30 years. It's massive. Like most people would say, Apollo versus Drago is better. Rocky is a guy that witnessed his best friend, mentor, everything die in the ring at the hands of this guy. Not only that, but you've got the insurmountable force of the Cold War as the backdrop for the 80s. It's personal. You can't get more personal than this. This is literally live or die situation. He puts himself in this situation. He sees himself partially responsible for not throwing in the towel during the fight with Apollo Creed. And he's got to dig
stop.
Like
And go.
You call it a life or death situation, but I mean, they're trying to save the bloody world. And it starts off not being personal, it starts off being political, but as they get to know each other, it turns from hostility into sort of a tongue-in-cheek friendship, and they start competing over who killed more. It still only counts as one when it kills the Oliphant, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's not just an in-joke, it is their relationship and their friendship building. And I do not distinguish between a rivalry and a friendship, because they can coexist. I mean, it doesn't have to be animosity.
And go.
Like the rivalry would stand out more in Lord of the Rings within the Fellowship if you didn't already have rivalries between such as Aragorn and Boromir and many other people within the Fellowship. And there's more interesting rivalries in the trilogy other than their two. Drago and Rocky, I mean, 30 years on, they're still at it. You know, they still hate each other and there is still that animosity there. And it takes like their sons and their, the people they've told that they will train to have their boxing match before they can reconcile. It's not a very quick thing like it is in Lord of the Rings with Legolas and Gimli.
And stop.
Well, I'm decided.
Go for it.
Al, where was your attack on Rocky?
I haven't seen the fucking movie. I don't know what it's. I don't know anything about it.
You need that on a t-shirt.
You could have still at least had seen some clips and got an idea of it to then have a case for it, because with Chris really got you when he was saying about Legolas and Gimli being more of a friendship, and I would definitely say with their banter with it still only counts as one, that's more friendly banter as opposed to fierce words against each other, and it's more of a progressive friendship as opposed to a full-out rivalry. Was with, as Chris explained, with Rocky and Drago, that's the Drogo, that is a full-on rivalry because of the history that these two characters had, even with going into the Apollo movies. So I'm gonna give it to Chris.
Thank you.
I want to say you can have friendly rivalries. That is a thing that does exist in films, and I feel like Al did not the best job of conveying that across. You could have said a lot more in that stake, but we are limited to 1 minute and a 30-second rebuttal. It is a shame that you didn't know more about the Rocky films, because that rivalry definitely can be attacked. But
you're talking a good game, Tayte.
At the same time, there was a clear winner to this one, and sadly, it was Chris.
Sadly, oh, thank you.
Sadly, Al. I'm trying to give him confidence,
Oh, it's motherfucker. Wait till the next round, mate.
I go with Chris as well. Height of the Cold War, it's gone on 30 years. That was probably the winning part of the argument. I think Al did well, considering he hasn't seen Rocky as well. But there's too much meat there with Rocky and Drago versus Gimli and Legolas, sorry. Clean sweep for Chris.
Okay, awesome. So unfortunately we have to cross Lord of the Rings off, Rocky and Drago to the next round. This one, okay, honestly probably the one I'm most looking forward to. There's another one later in the bracket which we'll get to, probably involving Jingle All the Way, but this is Director Krennic versus the two Jims from Dodgeball. Forgive me, I've only seen it once.
Yeah.
So we've got George with Krennic and Tayte. This was one of your picks, right?
It's Krennic and Tarkin's the rivalry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Awesome. I'll bring up the timer. Okay, so 1 minute to Krennic. Come on, we all know that we love Ben Mendelsohn on this channel. Do him proud. 1 minute on the clock. Go.
This is the height of the Empire's powers. They have just literally put the final screw into the Death Star, the giant beam. And what more do you want than the most powerful in the world? You have the two highest ranking military officers basically one-upping each other to try and obtain that full power to be the Emperor's number 2. Now you've got Tarkin that's been there for over 20 years in the process, wiping out Krennic. You've got Krennic who literally built the Death Star, made it work, authorized it, did the tech. And all they're trying to do is bickering to get on it because their rivalry is about power. And that is such a nice side story to a film like Rogue One, where it's introducing all these new characters and you bring up something which enhances and has consequences on the entire original trilogy that follows on from this. And that is a rivalry like no other. Whereas you got Cobra, the Cobra Gym, the average Joe Gym. It's not really a rivalry. It's more individual personal rivalries within it. And they're just not really
the individual personal rivalries.
Wait,
Sorry.
back down.
You can add time on. You can add time on. I'm just saying.
Okay, we'll get to that. But the rivalry of being the most powerful person in the Emperor who runs the universe at this point, to be that number 2, is far more interesting than about 2 guys that own a gym.
Okay, time 1 minute.
You can give him more time, a little bit more time if you want. Sorry for butting in. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that it wasn't
Take
between-
your minute.
I gave 10 extra seconds there.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Tayte, go.
Take the stakes within your own universe for granted. I mean, yours is obviously like Death Star, who has the most power within that universe. For this situation alone, whoever controls the gym, it doesn't start as a personal rivalry. I mean, these are 2 opposing gyms. Obviously, Peter LaFleur is the slacker. He doesn't have the best gym. And then you have White Goodman, who is this absolute beefcake and wants to just kind of take over as many little gyms as possible and go about his way. And within its own universe, this film gives you that stake of rivalry. You have a love interest in there, which they're both also competing over. So it's not just the gyms. With your rivalry, I feel like Tarkin wins that straight off the bat. I mean, he's a person who actually gets respect from Vader throughout all the films we've seen him in. Krennic does not. And that rivalry, I mean, we even have the line, Krennic, you stand here upon my achievements, not yours. Like, Tarkin's winning that battle. That isn't a rivalry. That is a boss stomping on one of his lower down.
Time, 30 seconds, George, go.
See, the rivalry is just corporate greed. We've seen that in so many films. It's been done and dusted. This is the elite of corporate greed. And you may think that Tarkin does, crap on him. But if Krennic was in control, if Krennic took that as he should have, Tarkin chose not to invite the Emperor to make sure he won. If that happened, Tarkin's in control. It's a rivalry over. Had Krennic have survived, had Krennic have took control, there would be A New Hope would have been done and dusted. Krennic would have just wiped out every planet. There'd have been no musing, no weights, no nothing. Star Wars wouldn't exist because Krennic would have controlled that entire universe.
30 seconds, Tayte, go.
Just want to say, hypotheticalness of the next stages of your universe doesn't exactly mean anything. Your film rivalry isn't exactly the thing that defines your film. Whereas my entire film is defined by this rivalry. It's defined by the heat between the 2 gyms, the dodgeball tournament, the stakes that lead up to it, the different jabs that they have at each other during the way. Your film isn't about the rivalry. My film is completely about the rivalry. It lives and dies on it. And my rivalry is beyond your rivalry in every sense of the word.
Time. Okay, I'm going to go first on this one. I really, Lord knows, I want to give it to Krennic. Like, come on, Krennic's my boy. I am going to have to give it to Tayte that, and he won me in that rebuttal, saying that, the entire film of Dodgeball does revolve around that rivalry. It's make or break with that rivalry, whereas it's a very, very small part of Rogue One. As good part as that is in Rogue One, I think Tayte just won me there on the rebuttal side, so I'm going to have to give it on Tayte to this one, even though he talked shit about me the last round.
I think I'm going to have to be the same as Chris and go for Tayte with this one because of that. Again, that rebuttal, because Dodgeball, it's a very weird movie. I would dare say it's not really that good, but opinions aside, you can't you take out the rivalry in that, there's no film. Whilst with Rogue One, as interesting and great as that rivalry is, we all know what's going to happen at the end because it's just a middle film. So we know what's going to happen with the implications and everything. So, yeah, Tayte. Sorry, George, you didn't dodge the wrench this time.
In defense of that, though, I didn't expect Krennic to get hit with a Death Star beam. He took that to the face, the entire beam.
You know what happened?
Laser eye surgery.
If he would have survived, You know when like Tarkin's like evacuating our moment of triumph without going off tangent. Krennic could have just deployed the entire fucking garrison on those X-wings. There wouldn't be a Star Wars.
Well, in the history of Star Wars of like characters coming back from the dead, like I'm still holding up hope that Krennic's going to come back in an anthology film.
With half a face.
It'll be like Endgame where the Ashes just like, oh, I must have said something there. I'm not spoiling it for people, even though the spoiler ban lifted. Right, have I been?
We are halfway through.
We are halfway through, and if you bear with me, the next...
I would have said Tate as well, by the way. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. On there.
All about the rivalry.
We just wanted Krennic on there, right? I'm trying to kill enough time so that I have an updated battle of the bracket.
Did we lose?
Everyone.
I was going to say for a second, we almost lost everything on the left. We always have themes of that in the battle of the brackets, where we almost lose all of one side.
Bear with me one moment, folks.
Is that down to the way that we organise the battle, perhaps?
I just think it's just the way of the argument.
Mm.
So if you look at the screen now, we should have an updated halfway through round one image. We have corrected the George McFly. We have a Marty McFly and Biff there as well now.
Awesome.
But we have a halfway through, so we've got 2 quarterfinals lined up. And next up, we've got the Prestige versus Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay, I'm not going to lie. It's been a while since I've watched The Prestige, despite it being my favourite Nolan film. Okay, let's do it. I'm ready.
Oh boy.
But for the record, I think this was like on 3 of our lists, right?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and say this now. The Prestige was the #1 pick for 3 of us, and Chris beat myself and George to the punch. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting.
Awesome. Okay, who's manning the timer on this one?
Isn't it Pirates of the Caribbean Al's pick?
Pirates of the Caribbean's my pick.
Isn't it?
Oh, my bad. Sorry, I thought that was out. Right, I have an eye on the timer, so 1 minute on the clock for Chris. Go.
Okay, I mean, if you're going to define rivalry, this is pretty much the epitome of that word. 2 people competing for something in the same field, and it doesn't get more intense in this movie, The Prestige, with the characters of Angier and Borden. This is a really interesting relationship in that it does start as a friendship, perhaps a work friendship, but a friendship nonetheless. Happily going about their business, their life of magic. They love it. And that passion, that love turns into something completely tragic and something completely insane. By the end of the movie, each character is becoming more insane than the other one. You don't know where you stand with them. You don't know who's the protagonist, who the antagonist is, because their love of their craft has completely consumed anything, to the point where they will essentially murder people. They will put people in harm's way, and it gets incredibly brutal. I'm trying not to go into spoilers in case anyone hasn't seen it. It's very, very difficult, but you have relationships breaking down. You have people going to extreme lengths just to put on a show. They essentially want the same thing. They want to wow the crowd. They want people to have that sense of magic.
Tate?
Sorry, I didn't hear you call it.
Go.
So the rivalry that stems from Captain Jack Sparrow and Barbossa is set from the very first film in that franchise, and they both want the pearl. That is just plain and simple. Jack Sparrow used to own the ship, and Barbossa basically took it from a mutiny, and Jack kind of had to go about getting his pearl back. That's the entire kind of front of the first film. This rivalry doesn't just last 1 film, and you kind of expect it after one character is dead in that film, that the rivalry would just completely go because he's got his pearl back. But even when Barbossa comes back, and even throughout the entire franchise with all the films heading on from that, there is still that rivalry there. Whether it's a hero versus villain thing, or whether they're both walking the line of that anti-hero kind of settlement, they both want to what the other person has, and they both compete for that throughout the entire film. With your rivalry, it just seems to transcend into absolute madness throughout the entire film, and it almost gets lost in the own plot of Nolan's ways.
Stop.
And
Chris, go.
Okay, so let's talk Jack Sparrow and Barbossa for a second here. I mean, if you're going by movie 1, sure, they have a rivalry, but I mean, it's nothing special. It's nothing it doesn't even hold a candle to the rivalry in the Prestige. But you say that the rivalry continues into the other movies. It really doesn't. Like there isn't a rivalry in the second movie, and then beyond that, it is kind of going to what we've said before, like a friendly banter. That level of tension from the first movie doesn't continue to the other ones, which lessens the impact of that rivalry. The Prestige being one movie, you get everything in there. Like these are two people that.
Tayte.
Jesus Christ, it goes so quick.
Your rivalry starts with basically a misunderstanding and a sad death from the misunderstanding, but misunderstanding nevertheless. The rivalry that comes from here is pure hatred, absolute pure hatred. One person mutinying on the other and stealing their ship. That's absolutely something that motivates the characters from the very start. It sets the characters up for every single film that follows. It shows the motivations of the characters throughout the entire film. It has that longevity. It has something that moves through the films. Sorry.
That was quite a hard one. Anybody come to a conclusion yet?
I'm still done.
Tayte just drinking in that vitamin D right there.
My sentiments exactly.
I'm gonna bring it back to the core mechanics that I always do and talk out loud while I make a decision. Chris defended his well. However, there wasn't much to defend because Tayte didn't really get to attack the Prestige. I thought once Chris spoke past Pirates of the Caribbean, once you get past the Black Pearl, it is more friendly banter. And, even in that pitch from the bracket, they're just one-upping each other and you kind of lose that sense of rivalry. And I thought Chris made that point very well. And when Tayte said, yours was a misunderstanding, but someone died, to me, that kind of put it into Chris's hands.
It's all fun games until someone dies.
Yeah, and Pirates of the Caribbean, well, no one really did die until like 5 films in. After.
Well, they were already dead in the first.
Yeah, I say until they each died a couple of times before. But I think
mostly dead.
Yeah. We'll come.
I mean, the franchise is dead, unfortunately.
Has anyone come to a decision?
I have. I'm gonna go based on, as I always do, my attacking instincts. I thought Chris had more attack against the Pirates films than Tayte did against Prestige.
I think the same thing as well. I mean, I love both movies, but yeah, I will agree with Chris saying that with Sparrow and Barbossa, it does later turn into this kind of like friendly banter as opposed to like the actual rivalry that really does play out. Like, as you said, the Prestige is only one film and it's that kind of rivalry just compressed into that whole film, and that's what makes it. And it's the same with like how Dodgeball, if you take out that rivalry, what is there for the film? Whilst especially with the later ones, you take out that rivalry, nothing really changes. I mean, he isn't even in the second one, except for the last second.
I mean, he's dead in the second one, so like.
Well, he goes back at the end.
Yeah,
that was a great cliffhanger, though. Like, I'm not gonna lie, when that was for Dead Man's Chest.
Eating an apple.
as that is the last possible friendly rivalry to be in the bracket, I do want to say friendly rivalries can be a thing.
I know.
They can. They're just not as good as real rivalries.
See that, Tayte? I'm still giving it to Chris.
Oh no, I knew you were giving it to Chris. That's why I said friendly rivalries can still be a thing.
And Al, we need to ask Al where he would have gone.
Do you know what? I think if Tayte had mentioned Jack saving that one shot and little things like that and built that up a little bit more, as Chris, you did with the allusions to things that they do that are pretty fucking brutal, to be honest, that keep the rivalry going, keep it up a notch. I think Tayte would have won it, but he didn't quite take that angle, so I have to give it to you, Chris.
Awesome, thank you. This is probably, for the most part, we've avoided like big rivalries in films. Like we don't have Luke and Vader on there or anything like that. This is probably the biggest one we have out of all the rounds now. So we have Harry Potter and Voldemort versus Charles Xavier, and I've gone by their real names, haven't I? Eric Lenchett, Magneto, and Professor X from X-Men. So who has Harry Potter?
And it's Al.
Okay, so we've got
big fight.
Okay, so 1 minute on the clock for Al. Give me a second.
I'm on it. Okay, you ready?
Okay, he's got it.
Let's go.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
So this is arguably one of the biggest and most famous rivalries in movie history. Harry Potter versus the Dark Lord Voldemort himself. So obviously this is something that's consumed the entire film trilogy and arguably would extend beyond that. So we have Harry Potter, who as a 1-year-old, his parents are murdered by Voldemort and is scarred for life by his attack on a baby. Voldemort himself is nearly destroyed, and he sees Harry in many ways as the crux, no pun intended, of everything that he needs to destroy in order to come to power. All right, pun intended, to come to power. So when Harry does reach 10 years old and come to Hogwarts, Voldemort by this point has got enough power back that he can start to put tendrils out and start to attack Harry. And throughout the movies, we see this. It comes up a notch and up a notch as he tries to rebuild his army and come back. But all in his mind the entire time is he must kill Harry, this symbol of his failure,
And
of
stop.
his humanity.
And go.
See, when you get Charles and Eric, you've got Magneto and Professor X. It's not just a rivalry. They are both fighting for the same thing. They just want mutants to be accepted within the world and all that jazz. So what comes of that? You've got one, the pacifist manner. He wants people to learn, to be educated. You've got the other, people are going to be against me, so I'm going to go against them. And it creates this fascinating dimension between the pair of them that they have the same common goal, and it's the ways they go about it. And what makes it more tragic and greater as a rivalry, that they have such deep respect for one another, going from the opening film, chronological-wise, from First Class, going all the way to the sort of the later films where you've got Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. Seeing them as friends in real life as are the actors, it adds this dimension to their rivalry that they're one-upping each other, and every scene between them, it's respectable. It's class, and you understand why each of them is going about it the right way. You see why the other, and you agree why the other is against the other. It's this fascinating dimension and rivalry that you don't really get. Problem with Harry Potter is essentially it's not really a rivalry.
Stop. And go.
I'm sorry. It's not really a rivalry. One cannot live while the other survives. You're saying that's not a rivalry. Part of Voldemort's soul is imprinted onto Harry and can look into his mind. And Voldemort torments Harry. For the love of it, Snape says that he loves to do this to people. He organises Sirius's death by the hands of Bellatrix just to get to Harry. Are you telling me there's not a rivalry there? It's a deep. It goes beyond hatred. It goes beyond malice.
And stop.
It's a rivalry.
And go.
It's not a rivalry because it's a prophecy that was read wrong. The prophecy is actually about Neville Longbottom. It's not about Harry. It doesn't feel like a rivalry. You split up into the core chunks of things. They never really defeat one another. The Horcrux is split between everybody. I don't feel it's a rivalry. I feel it's a prophecy. And this is about an old man. This is about an old man trying to kill a baby, for God's sake. Trying to kill him at school every year. Fails every time. These are two old guys who are doing it while they're younger, doing it at middle age, doing it at old age, trying to one-up each other for the same common goal. Yours is just a prophecy read wrong, and the guy got the wrong end of the stick.
And stop.
Just out of curiosity, Al, what house are you in at Hogwarts?
I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I tried Pottermore once. It gave me Slytherin, and I got annoyed, so I rage quit.
Why would you be annoyed at that?
Yeah, I'm Slytherin.
I have reason to rage quit when I got Hufflepuff, dude. Like, Malfoy says that he'd rather leave Hogwarts than be in Hufflepuff. But yeah.
Because I made up my mind. Because you could have had pretty much anyone in Harry Potter. I think the bigger rivalry in that franchise is more between Harry and Draco as opposed with Harry and Voldemort. Because as George argued, it is a prophecy, and it could have been Voldemort versus Neville if it went down that direction. It's basically just hatred because you could end me, as opposed to hatred because I don't like you and you could possibly end, like, beat me and things like that. As like with Professor X and Magneto, as the creator said, this was basically an allegory of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, with how they portrayed this kind of the civil rights movement. And you can really see that they both really understand where the other one is coming from, but they just can't accept the fact that the other person is doing this thing, which they see as like either weak or horrible, excuse me. So, and I think George really did argue that well to really get that across. So I'm going to go with George.
I'm going to go with George as well. Honestly, I didn't have much of an attack on X-Men from Al at all. Like you did play like a very good defense to Harry Potter. I like the angle of George's argument as well. I didn't even think of that, where he says that the actors in real life, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, are friends in real life, and that adds a different dynamic to the role as well. I thought that was an interesting angle in the argument. And you did kind of, I mean, I guess I've always realized it, but not until you just painted it out there, where you said that Voldemort has tried like 8 times to kill Harry Potter. And
He always waits until summer. You realise that?
Yeah, it's like
They're kids' movies.
now
They're
I
kids' movies.
They're not kids'
Dude, have
movies.
you seen Deathly Hallows like that? A kids movie. Now I just really want to see like a Saturday morning cartoon where Voldemort's like the villain of the week. Keep trying to kill Harry Potter. Like, I'll get you next time, Harry.
And I know it doesn't matter, but I would have given it to George because Harry Potter is not a trilogy.
Did he?
He did say that, but I just didn't want to.
It's an octology. Is that
Jesus Christ?
Is that
Technically, the 7 books, like the whole idea of number 7 is really important, and then the filmmakers were like, screw it, let's do 8.
I would defend that one being split in 2, though.
I'm so glad that trend of like splitting the final thing into 2 parts is now over. Hopefully,
I bet it's going to come back because of Infinity War.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's true.
DC, like, let's see what we can do.
Let's just have a different name for it.
Did Endgame outgross the entire DC universe in 10 days?
Probably.
That's a good question.
Right, so our next round. So we've got the X-Men crew moving through to the next round. This is actually we've got Jingle All the Way versus Back to the Future for people watching. Jingle All the Way was going to be my 4th pick, and then George stole it from me very, very cruelly. So this is going to be a very difficult one, considering I also really wanted this pick, but now I've got to find reasons against it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So George is up first with Arnie and Sinbad from Jingle All the Way. Then I'm following it up with Marty and Biff from Back to the Future trilogy.
Are you ready, George?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
These are just 2 fathers at Christmas Eve trying to get their son a present. They just didn't get the time. They missed their chances to get him this present. The one thing that every kid wanted that year. It is a toy, and that's all it is. The whole film comes down to we need to outdo each other to get this final toy because we want our son to have the great Christmas. Immediately from their opening scene together, you understand both of them. They just want to impress their kid. Now, what grows from this? Terrorism becomes a part of it, you know? As this film starts with friendly banter, this ends with a postman literally putting a bomb through a post to try and get a toy. Now, there are rivalries, and there is breaking the law, and then there is literally the next catastrophe. All of that for one present, that shows how far they're going. The other guy, he basically ends up becoming the toy in real life. There's nothing that this film doesn't over encapsulate with the rivalry itself. It comes out and they're just one-upping each other. It's more of 100-upping each other to who's going to reach that absurd point. And you know what? It makes it so much more enjoyable. It makes it a family film. You've got this realism to it. Everyone understands.
And go.
In the hands of any other director, Biff and Marty could just be viewed as like another typical sort of high school bully, but it goes so beyond that when we get into the topic of time travel with Back to the Future trilogy. We're introduced to Biff in the present day where, you know, he has been making George McFly's life a living hell from all the way to a teenager, all the way through adult life. He's still been a presence. And Marty's been seeing this since probably birth. Like he's been seeing this guy coming and tormenting his family, making his father feel really low and everything like that. Then when we go back to the future, Marty realizes this firsthand. And you know what? Like, I'm not going to, sugarcoat it. Biff tries to rape Marty McFly's mom right there, and Marty sees it, and like, imagine what that's going to do to a guy. You talk about rivalry, that is like the line you do not fucking cross, and Biff crosses that line. We then snap back to, when the timeline's been changed and everything like that, and, Biff finally does, is lower. He's treated as low as George was until we get to people.
And go.
The problem with the rivalry in Back to the Future is that it's really good in that first film, and it's an absolutely fascinating rivalry. It's got a nice angle, but when he gets the second one, it's like, oh, there's those scenes that we saw in the first one. He gets the third one, it's like, oh, they're doing those scenes again. There's a beauty to it, but then it's so overdone to the point of, oh, he's just going to come back in this scene and do that, and that's how I feel Back to the Future. Across that trilogy, the impact of the rivalry lessens, because they keep going back to it. The way it's done is so beautiful in the first one. Whereas with this is a solid film. This film can't exist without the rivalry.
And stop. and go.
So you say they're repeating it. I think that's strengthening the rivalry there because it ebbs into like many different decades. It transcends so many different decades, the past, the future, the present, everything. Jingle All the Way, like you mentioned that it gets really ridiculous. And it does get really ridiculous. Something as very, human as two dads fighting over a toy at Christmas. When you get to the end, it's like a damn Power Rangers cartoon on the carnival, people using jetpacks and flying, and the whole simplicity and strength of that rivalry, which is so believable and human, is just completely undone in like the last
And stop.
Good fight.
Good fight. Yeah, that was really
Oh boy.
That was a weird one.
That's the problem with a good fight. It makes it difficult for us to decide.
To be fair, I think me and Chris normally have like even ones.
Yeah.
That's
It's usually with us, George, it's like shared stuff that we like, so it's just really difficult.
And like if you look at Battle of the Brackets winners, I think we're together like 1 or 2 apart.
Yeah.
And then you got like Tayte who's won 1 in 3 years.
That's me, who has a grand total of 0.
In terms of like rivalries, can we add like George and Tate from Battle of the Brackets?
For sure.
I will happily argue for that. And lose, as I usually do.
You're still not bitter, are you, Naomi? That
I'm not bitter with anyone else.
No, not at all.
I just Al. Anyone goes up against the Emperor, Al finishes them.
True.
This is actually really difficult. Does anyone want to go first?
No.
Not particularly.
Okay. So I haven't seen Jingle All the Way.
What? That's the best Christmas film after Die Hard.
Have you seen Jingle? Okay.
What do you mean? Love Actually is the best Christmas film.
No.
So
Anakin
we'll move on from
Skywalker's
that.
dad is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Explain to all.
So that's how he was born. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Force.
We've had Naomi hasn't seen Blade Runner. We've seen people that haven't seen the Spinal Tap. Out of all the movies,
Spinal Tap, with bloody guitar in the back.
I will say this. In the original arguments, because I think the rebuttals were pretty much even, very difficult to decide on those. But on the original arguments, I want to say George had it ever so slightly. And I really mean ever so slightly. And that's purely down to the fact that he was talking about the escalation of it. And in his rebuttal, he did also mention that there was repeated scenes throughout the franchise, but it's the same rivalry being played out in exactly the same way over again. So I'd give it to George.
I think I'm going to have to agree with Tate there, especially since that, as much as I love Back to the Future and I love all of the trilogy, Jingle All the Way, as stupid of a film as it is, it does have that escalation of rivalry between the dads just like going at each other to really try and do the best for their kids. That is a rivalry. I feel like with Marty McFly, he inherited that rivalry, and it's played well in all of the films, but it's pretty much the same. Done well, but the same. He may be an asshole, but Jingle All the Way weirdly wins. What universe is this?
Don't underestimate the power of Jake Lloyd.
Why? Because he'll do a DUI on me.
Al, where would you have gone with this one?
I probably would have given it to you, Chris, because I think the scene about saying it over and over again, I think that's a good point because you see it in so many different contexts and various ways the situation could have played out. You really get a sense of these characters, who they are, how they would react in different situations, how it would change them, how they would interpret the world. So to me, that's a stronger argument than two blokes fighting over a doll. I haven't seen Jingle All the Way, by the way.
What? Oh my God! Oh Jesus!
Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap.
This hurts me that people haven't seen Jingle All the Way. I thought that was a movie that like everyone's seen. Even in Jingle All the Way, there's like another great rivalry, right? With the two neighbors. The guy who plays.
Oh yeah, he's trying to get with his wife.
Yeah. I'm not even mad that Jingle All the Way has gone through. Like, I was clutching at straws to think of arguments against it. It's a fucking incredible movie. So last up, which will finish round one, we have Rush versus The Mummy. Why am I blanking on the names there? You guys know Rush more than me. Like, you guys are the Rush guys, and then we've got Rick O'Connell and Imhotep. There we go. That's more my jurisdiction with the Mummy. So who's got Rush? It's like, well, I know it's going to be George or Tayte. Tayte. Okay, right. So 1 minute on the clock for Tayte. Off you go.
James Hunt and Niki Lauda, two of the greatest rivals in real life, finally put to film, and wow, what a film it was, and what a rivalry playing out on screen. You have the two people with quite humble beginnings within karting. The rivalry kind of starts to pick up a little bit there. You then have them joining into the main leagues of the motorsport. You see them with different approaches. One person gets thrown into the best team immediately, and the other person has to work his way up. And it's not just the differences on track and how they progress through the sport and how they become bitter rivals in that sense. It's the way they go about their own sport in themselves. One of them has a very kind of quiet, calculated approach, wants to get involved with the mechanics, and the other person wants to go off drinking and live off his victories. It gets to the stage where people's lives get put at risk, and it's these two bickering and having that kind of tension between each other that causes one of them to have a life-changing injury.
And time. Al, off you go now.
Let's talk about rivalries. This is one that's been thousands of years in the making. So we're talking about two men who are, they are just men to begin with, who are deeply in love with their women. Imhotep absolutely loves Anck-on-the-Moon, but she's the Emperor's property. Obviously, he gets found out, Emperor dies, he gets incarcerated, entombed, bad shit. Rick O'Connell, he only just meets this woman and he's just falling in love with her. So it's not just a rivalry between the two for the world, it's also over Evie and trying to save her from their respective weapons, if you catch my drift. So Imhotep is trying to kill her so he can bring back Anck-on-the-Moon, fucking hell. And Rick O'Connell is trying to stop that and save Evie, as well as save the world. It's a lot more than a rivalry just about the world, though. It is about these two characters, the looks they share, even though they don't speak the same language. The I'll be seeing you with the torch, you know, with the sword fighting the
time. 30 seconds, Tayte, go.
So on one hand, you have a high octane rivalry which pushes not only the sport to the limit, but each other. They push each other as far as they can go to the point where they almost motivate each other to do better, versus your typical hero versus villain that you see in almost every single film up until that point and past that point. You have a very unique rivalry of two people who aren't generally bad people, who just so happen to be on the different sides of the coin fighting against each other, versus bog standard villain and Brendan Fraser in the desert.
30 seconds, I'll go.
No, Imhotep is not a bog standard villain. He's tried to save Anck-on-the-Moon in many ways. Even in the second movie, when she comes back sort of reincarnated, he still loves her and he's still trying to get power. Even when he's fighting the Scorpion King, he's saying, I'll do it for you and we'll be together. And she in the end betrays him, but it's about that rivalry. It's a complicated character. He doesn't just want to rule the world. He doesn't just want that. To begin with, he just wanted love. He just wanted her. And it's this character that makes
time.
I've just noticed that there's no rivalry between like women or a man and a woman.
You generally can't find those in films.
I was gonna pick Kylo Ren and Rey, but it can't really be done till past episode 9.
Yeah. If you got meshed up against Chris, I feel like Chris would just go off on one on you.
It's not finished though, isn't it? Like they could still be BFFs.
I would sacrifice all my time on my other picks and just say, can I take that time and bank it on that one argument?
I would go against Kylo Ren, to be fair, and someone else.
Right. I'm going with Tayte on this one. I'm sorry, Al. I'm sorry. You know I love the Mummy films. If this was an argument for character study, I feel like you gave me a great character study on Imhotep and, you know, his love interest of Anck-on-the-Moon, but I didn't really get much of a sense of that rivalry with Rick. Like you kind of hit on it a little bit in your main argument, but I feel that sort of gradually ebbed away and then it was just Imhotep hype. Tayte, the really interesting point of the rivalry to the point where they're almost pushing each other onwards. I thought that was a really cool angle to go with. I just think that Tayte had the more well-rounded argument as to why it's a better rivalry than Mummy and Mummy Returns hype, which is justified, but Tayte had the better argument.
I'm going to have to agree with Chris on that because you didn't really... Al, as much as I love the Mummies films, you didn't really explain a lot about the actual core rivalry and why it was the best. You mostly talked about how they were fighting over women, which as a woman, I'm a little bit like, excuse me?
Women are the prize, Naomi. Don't you know this?
Oh, wait. So is this why you have me here? So I'm the prize at the end of the bracket. Great, thanks. I mean, I was going to give it to Tate now, since he's laughing in that corner. I give it to him anyway.
We're not misogynistic on this channel. We promise. We're not. We're not.
Yeah, I'm just the token woman here, as we all know.
We've got to be diverse somehow, haven't we? Otherwise, it's just a sausage fest on the channel. Like, come on. So yeah, who are you going with? Sorry, Naomi.
Tate.
Tate. Okay. And George.
I would have also gone with Tate. There just wasn't an attack on.
I haven't fucking seen it, mate.
I know you haven't seen it. I know you haven't seen it.
I'm just waiting for the pick which he picks where he hasn't seen the film, but he just picks something.
Tate, should we change like the next season of Film Club that you get Al on the show instead, so you can actually show him some of these movies?
So Al, this is a film called Blade Runner.
Well, then
I know you've seen Blade Runner. Let's go with have you seen Snatch? That's up on my shelf.
Yeah, I have.
Ah, shit. I've picked the two films you've seen before.
Tate, maybe you're not the best.
Only two films.
Right.
We've got Brinsley in the comments. He said that 7 Days and 7 Nights is a good man versus woman rivalry. I've never seen that movie, so I can't comment on that.
Oh, I know of that movie. Yeah, it's basically I think it's Josh Hartnett like having a bet with the women to abstain from sex.
I am an idiot. I've just thought of the best film rivalry.
As of
between a man and a woman.
Just these 2 seconds. Oh, not man and a woman. I've thought of a group of people.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh,
Nurse Ratched versus. Oh, why didn't I pick that?
you could have Misery as well. Annie Bates.
No, that's not much of a rivalry.
not a
But
rivalry,
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a rivalry.
Kind of is, because she gets bashed over the head with a typewriter at the end of the movie, so that's a rivalry in my books.
But she bashes his legs and then says, "God, I fucking love you."
Revenge. There you go. Rivalry. My argument stands.
Okay, our first round is done. I'm assuming we've stalled enough time for George to have done the bracket.
Yes, we have. So if you look at the screen now, round 1 is done and dusted. We have a quarterfinal set up. So we have Zoolander versus Blade Runner, Rocky 4 versus Dodgeball, The Prestige versus kind of X-Men, I guess, Jingle All the Way versus Rush. Now, I think this is going to be very intriguing because you've got 3 comedies in 3 different brackets.
Yeah.
Comedy v sci-fi, comedy v sport. Two sci-fi ones, I guess, then comedy versus sport again. So, well, biopic at that point. So, there's a very intriguing setup for round 2.
Okay, before we start round 2, I'm just going to go to toy quickly.
Cool. 2 of which are in there. So,
Actually, if I had like to pick for a bracket, I would have actually put the 2 Girls and Bride Wars. Has anyone seen Bride Wars, by the way?
I've never seen that.
I haven't, no.
So I just thought of another one, movie rivalry. It's not between 2 people, it's a group of people. It's a film that we actually watched recently, Rat Race, the comedy film. I don't know if
I love Rat Race.
So that would have been an interesting angle, like a rivalry between like 10 plus people, however many people it is. That would have been pretty cool.
Rivalries don't necessarily have to be just between one-on-one. It could be like many people. For example, like even in Greece with Pink Ladies versus Jaybirds or whatever the fuck they are.
Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the lists that I brought up, you had stuff like The Warden and Andy Dufresne from, Shawshank Redemption. You had the 2 Corleone brothers from Godfather 2. There's a hell of a lot of rivalries in movies, but yeah, difficult to whittle it down. We have Tate back.
Yeah, there's loads of rivalries. I'm just looking at some posters. I mean, yeah, Jurassic Park, the Raptors, everything else. You know, DNA dinosaurs versus real dinosaurs. Actually, real dinosaurs made up frogs. Science versus Jurassic Park. That's a rivalry.
Woody and Buzz Lightyear.
There you go.
Yeah, that was debated, wasn't it?
Yeah. Logan's Run.
Bride Wars. Have you seen that film?
Which film?
No.
Bride Wars.
Bride Wars. No.
Oh, come on!
I was very tempted to go with Captain America, Iron Man from Civil War, specifically from Civil War, as a rivalry.
Right. Are we all good to move on to?
We are,
We
and
are.
I have the timer ready for the
God.
first fight, which is Blade Runner.
Sure.
No, sorry, Zoolander versus Blade Runner. Zoolander going first. Are you ready?
I'm not ready because I haven't seen Zoolander, so this is going to be really difficult.
Okay,
Bracket should be the same.
Ah.
okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
You know the thing about Zoolander, Hansel Zoolander, they are the two best male models in the entire world. Now, that is already a peak rivalry. That is on a world-class scale. Jump to Blade Runner, it's just a guy doing his job, which was said earlier, but there are infinite amounts of replicants, there are infinite amounts of police, and this story may have already happened 200, 300 times. The replicants wanted to live. This could have been repeated so much, but they chose to focus on one story. Whereas how many male models are there at the Elite? There are only 2. That creates a far more interesting, tangible rivalry for them to one-up each other. And it begins from the moment of he has been usurped, he's been dethroned from being the best male model in the world. And it's the journey, is his acceptance of not being the best, and how is he going to come back from that? And he physically can't. He doesn't do it. He becomes a has-been. And that's such an integral part of this rivalry, because it's how can he cope with the mechanism of losing to his rival before the rivalry is really even anticipated. And it comes to blows as the film progresses when they realize that there is a super plot to kill all.
And go.
You say best supermodels in the world. Is this like an official title that's been gifted to them, or is this just a self-title that they've put on themselves? Okay. You say there's an inexhaustible amount of replicants. We learn at the start that there are 6 of this specific line of replicants, 2 of which died on the escape attempt. We have 4 left. It is literally, they are the last of their species. What they're talking about is extinction, essentially, of what Deckard's job is, and that's huge. And then it's the questioning of identity, and we talk about rivalries. This is a personal one because it's making Deckard question his own identity. Is he a replicant? Isn't he? What does life mean? Like, could someone still experience life as many others do with a limited lifespan? All these questions come into play with Blade Runner, and that's why it makes it a very interesting rivalry, in that you have 2 people at the end that do kind of see eye to eye. Unfortunately, it's in the very last moments of Roy's life, and that's it for him. He can't go on. Zoolander, 2 male models, like it's just 2 prissy people just trying out to each other.
And go.
I'm just looking at the opening text of Blade Runner now. It doesn't say there are 6 left. Now, in their set that come to Earth, there are 6, but the opening text does not say that. I have that on the screen. However, going back to this, they are given the award of the greatest male model in the world, and that's what sets the stone, because he walks up so stupidly on stage thinking he's already won, when actually he hasn't. He's humiliated himself in front of the entire world to see the number 2 go above him, and he can't cope with that, and that's what leads him to this journey. And to me, the tipping point is the male model walk-off. Catwalk.
And are you ready?
Yep.
Go.
So the culmination of your rivalry is essentially just pride and appearance. My rivalry goes beyond that. Like, it's different from just any other bog standard rivalry in the respect of Zoolander. This goes more. This brings up questions. This is a filmatic rivalry that is unparalleled, in that you have these 2 characters with different ideals that see eye to eye at the very end. But what the job that they're having to do and the way they're going about it is very brutal and is very violent, to the point where you could say that they're almost as bad as each other. And the effects of this rivalry are final.
And stop.
I really need to see Zoolander, don't I?
You'd love it. You'd love it.
This
Stupid but amazing.
was a very even battle. I just love
the fact that Zoolander is just so stupid, and it makes it hard to go up against.
Yeah.
Anything you have to say bad about it, it was like, yeah, that's the whole point. That's why it's funny.
Anyone at all. I went first last time, so I'll take it.
Silence every time.
I'll go. And I think with the fact that I just said that, we're saying, like, even though you had the points against it, which to be fair are valid, it's more to the fact that, like, yeah, that's the whole point of it. Of Zoolander. Again, it is, even though I did defend Blade Runner on the last one, you made a very good point, I think, George, that there's probably other ones, and why is it this specific one that we need to, like, essentially care about? I know it's part of the story, but films are weird. I think we've established that. Whilst with Zoolander, yeah, it's about men with looks and pride, but at the end of the day, that's what makes the film fun, essentially. So yeah, George argue better.
Okay, so this might actually no, it might not be a decider. We need
George, sorry, Al, you're up next.
Yeah, I think I have to go with George as well. I think he just argued really strongly because the whole film is about rivalry. And I feel like, obviously, you haven't seen the film, Chris, but it is about rivalry, and you can't just say it's just about this because that doesn't help. If it means something to the characters, then there is rivalry there. So it wasn't really a helpful argument.
Okay, Tate, out of curiosity.
I mean, I would have to take the George route and have to basically explain out loud, but I really liked your rebuttal, Chris. I thought George had a strong opening argument that you defended really well towards the end. It is very difficult arguing against a film that you haven't seen, and I feel that pain in some of these arguments.
It showed in that argument. For the record, though, Brinsley just did a comment. If Zoolander wins, kill me. Which is
where are you about?
Answer the postcard.
Zoolander is truly one of the greatest comedies in history.
I agree with you, and Zoolander 2 was given too much slack. It's an okay film.
Who?
Zoolander 2 wasn't a bad film. Zoolander 2 was not a bad film.
They just had it in. I mean, I haven't seen Dumb and Dumber 2, but that wasn't meant to be bad, but they just went for Zoolander because it was an older sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on from probably the biggest shock so far, we now have Rocky 4, Drago and Rocky against Dodgeball.
Wow.
Peter LaFleur and White Goodman.
There's the names. Could Ben Stiller make it to 2 semifinals?
Oh, please. I want to Ben Stiller off.
Ben Stiller versus Ben Stiller.
Oh, that'd be huge. Can we just vote mine through now for that? Okay.
Chris, you are at first.
Yep.
Oh wait, hold on. Sorry, you two are fighting each other.
Yeah.
I need to get a timer. Don't I? Sorry, that's my bad. Right, Chris, 1 minute on the clock, starting now.
Okay, both sports movies, both comedy movies for very, very different and possibly unintentional reasons. Why is Rocky IV's Rivalry so much better than Dodgeball? Dodgeball is essentially just two competing brands, gyms. You know, it's just like a face of a company, essentially, that are in the same neighborhood. Rocky's is personal. It's much more character focused. It's not just about, you know, who has the better gym, who gets the most members in. This is life and death. This is the death of a best friend. This is someone training and going up against said opponent who, for all intents and purposes, could murder him outright in the first round. So he's putting his own life on the line, which would mean leaving his wife, Adrian, alone with his son. But this is just something he's got to do. And that rivalry just resonates tremendously from Stallone's acting, from the story itself. Obviously, at the end of it, Rocky wins, but 30 years later, that rivalry is still burning there when you have Ivan Drago training his son. You have moments where Ivan Drago... Oh, okay.
Tate?
Yeah.
Go.
So you mentioned at the very, very start that both of them were kind of sports and comedies. And I'd say that Rocky wasn't initially intending to be a comedy, but your rivalry did come off so very silly in those films. And I will say this one thing now. Like, with my rivalry, it is intended to be silly. It is intended to be a comedy. It is intended to come off in that way. In the end, with your rivalry, I mean, you watch that final fight, they just kind of, they're not properly punching. There's nothing, it doesn't look like they're putting heart into the punches. It looks like they're play act punching, to be honest, just from watching the film. The rivalry seems very silly. And to say that it ended the Cold War with that fight, are you kidding me? That's just the most ridiculous and stupid thing I've ever heard. With my film, it at least knows where its universe is and at least knows where its rivalry is. It starts off very small with more and more people being drawn in to the point where it becomes bigger than just two gyms fighting up against each other. It is people's livelihoods. It is people's lives. It is the thing that keeps people from moving on and actually staying like focused.
Chris?
Had Apollo Creed not died in Rocky 4, I would agree with you that it is completely farcical. But, you know, Rocky 4 still does have its foot in the water of having those moments of heart and having such a pivotal moment, which doesn't just have meaning for that one film in Rocky 4, but also the lasting future of the legacy of the Rocky films when we get to Creed. When you get to Creed, that does resonate so much more with the character of Ivan Drago. It makes you go back and think of what was inherently a two-dimensional villain and fleshes him out so much more and gives him depth, and is probably the most emotional part of that film. Dodgeball, as you said,
I don't have legacy on my side, but I can say that your relationship between the two of them is very farcical. With the Globo Gym and with the White Goodman versus Piece of the Floor and Average Joe's, it doesn't just go down to those gyms. It goes down to more than that. It goes down to the love interest, the two people competing for that one area, the space that is involved with that. It goes down to money. It goes down to their fitness regimes, who is the better in that sense. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger throughout the film. With your film, it is...
Play fighting, Tate? Play
fighting.
Did you see the same movie that I did?
Chris, they're play fighting in that film. We're proper fighting now.
I thought they were like genuinely in all the Rocky movies punching each other.
No. I think like in one movie, I can't remember which one it is. I think it was probably the first one. He got knocked out by what's his face? I've forgotten his name. Apollo Creed.
Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers. There we go. Thank you.
Has anybody come to a decision?
No.
Can you tell I've only seen Dodgeball once? Many.
I can't remember last time I saw it.
Great film.
Al?
Oh God, don't go to me first. I haven't seen Rocky.
I'll remember arguments.
Arguments if we don't know anything.
I think Chris's point about it ending the Cold War seemed bloody silly because it's just two blokes trying to knock 7 shades of shit out of each other.
They do. But it also has political impact. So
you didn't tell me that. You didn't argue that.
I thought that was in the subtext, but okay.
No, so I'm going to have to give it to Tate.
That's fair.
Naomi?
Don't go to me. I have no clue at the moment.
Oh God.
Go on, George. Bring it home.
I'm doing it as neutral as I can, just thinking about the arguments. And when Tate said it was farcical, I didn't get an explanation to why it was farcical. I thought, here we go, he's about to just disregard the Rocky 4. And he didn't. And I think Tate would have had it if he elaborated. However, when Chris brought Creed 2 into it, when he spoke about we see him 30 years later and the impact this had on him across those 30 years, as unfair as obviously compare a film with a 30-year sequel against a one-off comedy, I think that was a big enough reason for me is to put it forward, because that did bring me back to Creed 2. I've only seen it 1.5 times, and the other half I was half asleep on the plane. I feel that argument, I think, had more levity leaning towards it for me as to why it was a better rivalry, bringing Apollo Creed's death into it. Now, I think Tate had a better rebuttal, but the opening wasn't strong enough, whereas Chris's opening had enough power to last. So I think Chris just narrows that. So that's
awesome.
So,
Naomi.
You should have gone second.
I don't know.
Just mouth the word Rocky 4 and we're good.
Is that bribery, Chris?
No, there's nobody. So it's all good.
Okay, Rocky 4.
No.
Oh. It's just the power and influence I have sometimes. What can I say?
We would like to hear a reason.
Yes, we would.
Better arguments on Chris's side, and I didn't hear enough very strong attacks on Rocky, aside from it didn't end the Cold War. Of course it didn't. It's a movie.
No, it did end the Cold War, genuinely. No, seriously, it did. It's one of the dumbest things ever, and someone else will have to use it in the next round to argue.
It's amazing, Tate, and you know it is. So
it's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in a film.
No,
yes, it is.
Even more dumber than The Room? How dare you?
Even more dumber than the robot in Rocky 4. No one mentioned the robot.
Yeah, was there a rivalry with the robot somewhere in there? That would have been amazing.
Wait, didn't Paulie sleep with the robot or something?
Paulie fucks the robot.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
But that's not the rivalry.
No, it's not. If you have a bracket for greatest love interests, then who knows? There may
Right.
Imhotep.
Oh,
Coming back.
There you go. There you go. You heard
Not
it
that-
here.
next up, we have the Prestige and X-Men Dear Lord.
This is going to be big.
For God's sake.
I've got to fight a Christopher Nolan film.
Okay, are you ready, Chris?
Chris, you're up first.
I have thought no, X-Men's up first.
Chris
Oh
is-
no,
no.
shit, no. Okay, crap. I hate going first, but okay.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
So with X-Men, you're sort of thrust into this rivalry right from the off. Like, obviously, you've got the history of the comic books that have an influence there, and respect of the actors aside, you are kind of just thrown straight into that rivalry. With the Prestige, and why I think it has the edge is that you see the origins of that. You see it develop across, like a roughly 2-hour movie, like a pretty standard runtime. You see so many facets of this relationship, and it's fascinating to watch. Inherently, as an example for the movie, you've got Angier, whose wife is killed during a mishap during one of the magic tricks at the beginning of the movie. And then inherently that you think that feud is based off that alone. Later in the movie, when he's trying to outdo his magic trick, he then says, like, offhandedly, "Oh, I don't care about my wife." He's completely forgotten why this rivalry started in the first place, and the rivalry has become this obsession to outdo someone in the same field, to absolute murderous and brutal circumstances. People's fingers get shot
And stop.
around.
And go.
I think the rivalry from that comes down to the fact that it's actually two people. Spoiler alert. He doesn't care about his wife because it's not actually his wife, it's his twin brother's wife. Now, we spoke about, it gets an origin. Now, it obviously is unfair. This is like massive rivalry across films. This was so good a rivalry. They had an origin film with the new cast. The fact that Fassbender and McAvoy came in and were as good as Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, gave it such levity, gave it this enhanced expectation that you appreciated, you understood the rivalry. That's something that with the Prestige, you don't get to understand the rivalry. You see it develop and you kind of get it, but it's not there. You don't really have a favorite. It's just, oh, look, he's going to do a magic trick. Whereas this is the two minds colliding. One's got obviously powers, the other's got powers too, but the Prestige doesn't feel as much as a rivalry. It feels of more of who's got the bigger dick contest. That really is what the Prestige comes down to. They're just trying to outdo each other. There is no common goal across that, to the point where he creates cloning. That's a bit far in the 1800s.
And go.
Let's go to Fassbender and McAvoy then, if we're going with First Class. Great film, great rivalry. However, that rivalry seems very, very fast and doesn't feel as developed as it could have been had it been spread across films. You have a very connecting the dots. We've got to get him in the wheelchair. We've got to have him having the mansion. We've got to have Magneto being the bad guy. And I think that does diminish quite a lot of that origin movie. With the Prestige, it inherently is a rivalry. It is the defining term of a rivalry. You see these two people, once friends, working.
And stop and go.
Two people, once friends, exactly what X-Men is. And it is a bit of a tick, you're right. But what the personal loss comes with this, Magneto ends up being responsible for Charles to be paralyzed. And we talk about, is this film is the best one. This is the best X-Men film, First Class. The origin of their rivalry is the best X-Men film, and that enhances what follows on later on in the later X-Men films in terms of the time period with Charles. You understand the reasoning between each moment, whereas the problem with the Prestige, it's just two rivals, and it's because it can be done again and again. That was really hard.
How's X-Men Apocalypse working out for you?
I was. Don't worry. We've
Steady
got the final X-Men film ever coming out next month because no one cares.
Steady now. We are redacting that statement from arguments, boys.
Yes.
Either way,
I'm surprised you didn't
I don't think, and we've seen it happen so often before. I'll go back to the one where Tom completely destroyed Blade Runner. When you have a director or a film which you love so much, it makes it so much easier to rip it to shreds.
No, it doesn't.
And I'd say, George, you did an amazing job of ripping to shreds the Prestige and the entire kind of relationship and rivalry between them. So I'm going to give the point to you.
I could see the venom in George's mouth when he says the Prestige is nothing more than a dick.
I know. You can tell, but I don't know. We've always seen those kind of things happen on Battle of the Brackets where if you have a film that the person loves and they go up against it, they will rip it to shreds because they know it best.
The hardest choices require the strongest wills.
I'm going to have to agree with Tate and give it to George as well. I think also with the fact that, you mentioned about how that rivalry is still depicted well in First Class. You did mention a lot about First Class, but I'll give you that because it worked in your favor, and how it would essentially was the spark from their rivalry. Yeah, fair dues.
Dal?
Yeah, I probably would have given it to George, but only by a tiny bit, to be fair. I would like to hear more about the bitterness of the rivalry and the personal relationship, rather than just at the very end they get their finger shot off, came out. But I would like to hear more than that wife died and tricks.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's pretty much the movie.
It's really hard to like compare one film to like 8.
That's true.
Is it more than 8 at this point?
I'm not gonna lie.
Jesus
Like from the
Christ.
picture and from the argument, I forgot that you were bringing in Fassbender and McAvoy.
That was
the X-Men
Yes.
timeline is an enigma unto itself. But
it's a mess. Don't worry, Disney can wipe it.
yeah, that's true. Maybe this is the whole multiverse thing potentially with new Spider-Man movie. Hopefully. So the next one we have Jingle All the Way versus Rush. So
Oh no, not another one.
on this one, I'm looking forward to.
Who has Jingle All the Way?
Oh my love.
it.
Me.
Oh, fuck. I'm in trouble.
Okay, you ready? Are you ready? Okay, 1 minute on the clock. Go.
The difference with Rush and Jingle All the Way is that Jingle All the Way is like a 1 day time period. Rush is set across like an entire season, and it develops further than that. You get a whole season of Formula One condensed into 2 hours, which is fine. It does a good job of covering that. But this rivalry is created and enhances and is done in 1 day, and this is so time specific to this. It gives you less time to make mistakes. You go to Rush, and as great as it is for a 2-hour film, they miss out all the boring parts of that entire Formula One season. There's 9 months. They can make it great by picking the best little points here, there, everywhere. Whereas this, there is no minute is wasted. They have to go in, get it done, whilst being a Christmas film, creating this rivalry, while juggling other rivalries. The character played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, he is dealing with family issues at home, with his son not spending enough time with him, a neighbor trying to get on his wife, having his own marriage problems, to juggle all those issues together and still coming out like with a fine health is insane.
Tayte for Rush, 1 minute, go.
You are right. One rivalry takes place over 1 day, and one of them does actually take place more. There's more than one season of Formula One that the rivalry takes place. It's over a couple of seasons, actually. And Rush does actually focus in on the hottest points of the rivalry, the ones which spark the most. But that's because it develops throughout the film. You have that development of the rivalry. You have the small little spark at the start, and it slowly builds and builds and builds to the point where their lives are under threat and they are pushing each other to the limit past the point. They are both competing for that world championship, the best in the world. They keep on pushing themselves to that point. With your film, it takes place over 1 day. That is a 1 day rivalry for the best film rivalry of all time. Are you kidding me? Why are you even arguing this? How can you even argue this? 2 real life heroes who are racing each other to the edge, pushing it beyond the edge, versus 2 people in a spat about toys over 1 day.
Time. Tayte, I thought you were going to go into push it to the limit there from Scott. 30 seconds for George, go.
You said multiple Formula One seasons. After the 1974 season, the only season James Hunt was actually in a title. The rivalry is done, dusted. Nicky Lauda and Ruth actually came out and he was really happy James won the title that same year. That's missing from the film, is the respect between them, said that day. Now, the reason my film encapsulates into 1 day, that makes it far more dramatic than this. Yours is we can tease it over the films. He said, why did you pick my rivalry? Because that's the best ones that have this sudden impact, the punch, the leftover, and it ends with them with respect. He gives him the toy because he becomes the toy.
This film ends with respect as well. They both respect each other as world champions. And you're talking about it being, it's a 1 day punch thing. With this rivalry, a person's face gets burnt off. He has to go through hospital. And do you know what motivates him to get back out of the hospital bed? It's the fact that his rival is out there competing, doing better than him. And he gets back up off that hospital bed and continues going through this horrifying surgery just to get back out into the field and just so that he can win the world championship. That's what a true rivalry is. Pushing each other even when one person's knocked down.
God. Okay. I hate to have to do this because, I love Jingle All the Way. I think George had it for his main argument, unquestionably, but I think Tayte just completely won me over there with rebuttal in that, when he is in that horrific state, the rivalry is what gets him back up. I'm putting Tate through, but I really love Jingle All the Way. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have no qualms about putting Rush through over Jingle All the Way because, yeah, as Chris said, that rebuttal, I give it to you, Sir Tate. That, yeah, a rivalry should make you keep going at it and try and defeat your bitter rival as opposed to, here, I am a toy. Now I will give you a toy.
And
Al?
Yeah, clean sweep for Tate, really. As he says, it's over 2 seasons and it's really a personal thing. And the hospital argument was very, very strong as opposed to it just being over 1 day for Jingle All the Way as well. So, yeah, clean sweep.
I was unsure as well about the stuff about what happened in real life as opposed to what happened in the movie. Like, if we're ranking it on the movie itself, you've kind of got to view that.
I will say, at the end of the film, you do have the 2 characters meet and they are happy for each other, if that helps.
Oh, yeah, they always got along. Laughter. There was no dirty
in the
driving.
heat of the moment, though.
It's hard to argue against that. It's one of my favorite films.
Jingle All the Way,
very well done film.
Ending, though, isn't it? Like you say, like all's forgiven at the end. He gets given the toy. Do you think he'd get to keep that toy in jail? Which is exactly where.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, the son probably gets it.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
I will say I knew nothing about Jingle All the Way going into this, and as soon as George said 1 day, done.
Right, so if we have a look at the screen now, we've got the semi-final setup. We have Zoolander versus Rocky and Draco, and we've got Charles and Eric versus Nicky Lauda and James Hunt.
That's amazing. I don't think we could wish for a better end to the bracket, could we?
It's going to be quite intense, I think. But going up first, we have Zoolander and Rocky. Sorry, I was just screen sharing them. My bad.
So exactly the same amount of time on this, isn't it? It's still a minute each, 30-second rebuttal. It's not until the final where you get your extra time. That's cool. So George, you're up again with Zoolander.
Okay, you ready, George?
I am.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
I think the issue with the Rocky Drogo rivalry is that when you get to Creed 2, as great as it is, it does obviously pass down to the 2 sons. However, Dolph Lundgren and Drago redeem themselves, and to me, the rivalry kind of ends up where Rocky doesn't really have any issues with him. He chooses to throw the towel in for his son. Drago goes against everything he stood for before because he's become this loving father, which is a fine thing to do. But to me, that really went against the character. I'm looking back at Rocky 4, when they've got their fighting with each other, it's lessened the impact of that, knowing each other time. He didn't carry on being that guy. He got broken after. Testament to Rocky that Rocky was able to break him, but I don't feel that had a lasting impact compared to Hansel and Zoolander. They're going at each other, 2 of the best guys in the world, like Drago, different scenarios. These are models. They're just trying to outsmart each other, outlook each other. When you get the moment where they have to team up to take down the people trying to kill all the male models, they have to take down Magnum, and that is how they do it. They have to team up only to save their entire livelihood.
And
save
and go.
So you're talking about teaming up. There is no teaming up with this rivalry. Yes, it is resolved at the very end after 30 years, but before that, this is fire and water. This is like ultimate good versus evil, essentially, with this rivalry. Ivan Drago's bigged up from the very beginning as this, huge imposing force. Obviously, you've got the backdrop of the Cold War, which does elevate that as well. But it's not until, his best friend is killed. He fights him in the ring. But what I love afterwards as well, and I know that I've got the benefit of having a sequel 30 years later, but you do get so much to Drago's impact that it's not just the rivalry from Rocky 4. The rivalry is also there in Creed 2, although it's not the focus. It is very much in the backdrop of the whole movie, in that his life has been in ruins. He lost his wife, he lost his status, he lost his country. He is living in absolute squalor, and all he's got is the effort of training his son to beat, Rocky's new opponent. So that feud is still absolutely there, regardless of, 2 competing male models who then have to team up in order
to stop. And go.
That's a criticism of Russia and communism more so than the rivalry itself. They were betrayed by them because they lost. They lose. The end. That wouldn't have happened if it was Rocky. Rocky wouldn't have been betrayed by the entire Americans. Hansel and Gretel, they are betrayed by the people that they believe are helping them, believe they're making these male models, giving them these great contracts, but actually it's all been a ruse so they can get the sweatshops to make these models cheaper. So not models, clothing cheaper. They find out that they have to join them and fight against that.
And stop.
There's nothing better than.
And go.
I get that they're very different films, and like the whole essence of it being a petty feud is inherently what Zoolander's all about. But this is no context. If we're going to talk about best rivalry in movie history, there is so much weight and depth to these characters, aided by Creed 2 as well. And also you've got the mirroring of throwing in the towel as well. At the end of Creed 2, Ivan Drago throws in that towel to stop history repeating itself so that this feud doesn't go on for another 30 years. And that's really the like, although they put aside their differences, albeit on very shaky ground, there is an end.
And stop. Oh
So
boy.
weird.
I go first.
And Gretel at one point.
Yeah, I keep thinking I'm going to say Hansel and Gretel.
He did.
Yeah.
I swear Gretel is a character though in these films as well. I'm gonna double
Greta,
check that.
maybe. Yeah, I'm going to give it to Chris. I think he had a really strong rebuttal. The point about it being prolonged and the way it was resolved in the end and the way he even brings their family into it, I think it's a stronger argument.
I'm gonna have to agree with Elder. I think that continuing argument of that it does keep going throughout not just the one film, but how it's continued into the Apollo films as well. As much as I love Zoolander, and I think that their rivalry is just amazing and hilarious, I think Chris argued his corner better. As great as George is as an arguer.
It's hard to argue
Zoolander
against.
did very well to get to the stage, but I would have also given it to Rocky.
I mean, I did pick it as the joke one last night. Like, do you remember when I said I was like, let's just go with something fun.
I didn't go this far, so be proud of yourself, man.
It took out Blade Runner,
It's
Yeah.
about Blade Runner.
and There Will Be Blood.
No Country for Old Men. No, There Will Be Blood. I also had the No Country for Old Men on my shortlist, but no, I went for There Will Be Blood in the end. You are right. Moment of concentration lapsed.
This is brilliant. This is just brilliant. So what's our next round? I haven't got the updated image on my phone.
Next round is
Charles and what? Not Charles and Xavier. Charles, Magneto and Professor X against Niki Lauda and James Hunt.
Wow. Okay, right. I'll man the timer on this one. So X-Men's up first. Georgia up first again. Okay, 1 minute. Off you go.
Now, the thing with this rivalry, it lasts decades, and like yours, there's respect in there. They completely understand one another. They come from similar backgrounds. They have the same goal. They just want to be the world champion. Now, the problem with not even of the film of this is that we understand they want to be champions, but there are so many sports films where we just want to be the best. We want to be the best. Of course, that's how it goes, and we do get a great thing. The problem is that because it is based off real life, we have that obvious angle of going into a film already knowing who won. It's that big a rivalry, and it really takes something of the vision. We talk about this great rivalry. You said Niki Lauda, he came off the burns, he came back to race. He quits the last race because of a little bit of rain. In film terms, he bottled it. He had the title to choose from. He completely bottled it. He left the last race knowing he would have won the title, but he just chose to leave it. He essentially handed the title over to his rival. That's really not how a rivalry should end. He threw the towel in. It completely disregards the beautiful build-up of the first hour and 3/4 for that. Whereas mine, they never throw the towel in, those two.
1 minute, Tate, go.
I'm sorry, but you're comparing a real-life event to something which has already been depicted in thousands of comic books as the background for each other's films. So you can't really say much about that in that respect. Not only that, but the rivalry between Professor X and Magneto is great in tiny little bursts, and it's amazing in those tiny little bursts. But you also have a lot of the films across both lots of franchises, both incarnations of each of the characters, where it doesn't really feel like as strong of rivalry. They're either the best of buds or they're sending off their pawns into war to fight each other. It really doesn't feel like a rivalry that goes anywhere past kind of different means for the same goal. There isn't really as much personal stuff in there as the rivalry between the two characters in Rush. These two are battling for the world #1, and they are as good as each other, but they have different approaches to doing it, and they have different means of getting there.
30 seconds, George. Go.
It's unfair to compare a real world to a comic book. That's the beauty of mine, is that it didn't have real life. It took the imagination of somebody screaming out of another to come together to create a character. You say these small little bursts. There's no little burst. There is not a single bad scene between Charles and Magneto in any of these films. You say they took their pawns off into war. It's the same as yours. There's two, they're two different people competing for the same thing. One's good, one's bad. Same with yours. One drinks and drives, the other doesn't drink and drive. He plays it by the books. It's the same rivalry encapsulated across many years. Mine's got a more lasting effect, knowing this come through.
Stop. 30 seconds, Tayte. Go.
But your characters don't actually change their opinions of each other throughout the entire films. It's a rivalry that's dead set in. Apart from First Class, that's the only film where it's anything different because they're not rivals in that film. Every other film is exactly the same rivalry repeated across every single film. Oh, look, I want this for mutants. Oh, look, I want this for mutants. With this film, with Rush, it builds throughout the film. You feel that tension burning towards the end of the film with the World Championship on the line. You absolutely feel.
That's the toughest fight the entire round. Out of both rounds we've had, I genuinely I have no idea.
Mind if I go?
Oh, Naomi's ready to go. Yep.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to give it to Tayte. For two reasons. First of all, Tayte did make a very good point in the rebuttal. People might say otherwise. Of how they don't really change, and they do in each other's opinions, and there's no kind of progression. Whilst in Rush, there is that kind of progression. And also with George saying that there's no real life thing with it. What did I say earlier? That Professor X and Magneto were based off the ideologies of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
There is an ideology, not the actual people.
Still, real life.
I mean, if Martin Luther King could control that, I would love to see that film.
Franchise in a completely different way.
Well, first of all, both of these characters are white.
Well, Magneto is Jewish.
He is. He's a minority.
If that counts, 2019. I don't know what the fucking colour code is. I thought his whole background was he was terrified of the Holocaust happening again for mutants, so he wants to go that way, and X wanted to go the opposite way and more integration. I'll give to Tayte, by the way.
Oh, shit, right in there. Okay.
I think he made a very good point. There are very small bursts of Magneto and Charles, and they are fantastic. But let's be honest, the majority of all the X-Men franchises is everyone else fighting everyone else.
That's true.
I'm going to be honest.
Whereas his film is about the two characters and the rivalry between the two, and there's, I'm guessing, interplay there.
Like, I'd love to see a movie just about Professor X and Magneto. Like, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Like Hobbs and Shaw.
Exactly.
That looks incredible, though.
Maybe that could be the reboot. Maybe we could get Jason Statham and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to play Magneto and Charles Xavier. Interesting. Fuck. I think Tayte took it for me on the rebuttal. I thought that, as I said, it was the strongest fight the entire battle. I think that one. But I like that he said that it is kind of the same feud repeated, with the exception of First Class, which is arguably one of the best X-Men films. I still prefer Days of Future Past, but I can see why people prefer First Class. That was tough, though. Like, very, very marginally, I'd give it to Tayte on that one on the rebuttal.
I mean, can I say that Rush is in like my top 10 films of all time?
Yeah.
Put that into context. And I've had to do 2 rounds against it. But now, if we have a look at the screen, we should see we have the final. We have Rocky and Drago against James Hunt and Niki Lauda.
Yeah, talk shit now, Tayte.
I've already tried to fight it once.
Now, for the final, I believe we have 1 minute and a half each. Correct?
That's true.
Yeah.
And 1 minute for the rebuttal. If we need it, I think we added that rule. Like, if we need it, that's fine. But you do have that extra leeway there in case you need it in your main argument. Yeah.
And for the rebuttal, it's 45 seconds.
No, it's a full minute.
Still 30.
Yeah, it's
4 minutes.
It's onto each one.
1 minute.
You need it. Just
because my laptop's running out of battery, so I'm just popping it on charge.
We'll take a small pause for tension.
Yep. Hey, are you going to bring your A game on this one then? Talking smack about me the whole battle.
I'm gonna have to.
Come
I'm
on.
gonna have to.
2 sports movies.
2 sports movies. 2 quite similar rivalries as well.
And Daniel Boone in one of them. Yes, thank you.
Thor.
Yeah, I loved him in Rocky 4.
I mean, you do have, you know, Thor and Baron Zemo, the 2 Expendables. There's loads here.
Mm.
Right. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Near me?
Yeah, I'm good.
Right. Chris, you are up first. 1.5 minutes on the clock. 3, 2, 1, go.
We're arguing best film rivalry here, and this is a rivalry that has lasted through the ages, quite literally, from the backdrop of the Cold War to modern day. It's there, and I know, as I said, like I know I've got the added benefit of a sequel, but to me, there is way more. You can read so much more into Rocky and Drago. What inherently you might view as this, you know, villain of the week kind of thing, this 2-dimensional villain. You know, he does get some sympathy, like you, even in the first film, even if we disregard Creed 2 for a second, at the end of Rocky 4, you do get the sense that, you know, Ivan Drago is there for the boxing only. Like he's in it for the sport, but he's got this, you know, huge backdrop. He's got the higher ups, he's got the press, he's got everything like that are trying to bill him as this poster boy for Russia. He is essentially their mascot. And then when we get to the sequel, which definitely does add a lot more gravity to his role and to that rivalry between him and Rocky, we see a desperate man. We see a complete shell of his former self, and he's sort of living the future that he wishes he could have had through his son. So you do have that family dynamic in the rivalry as well. It's not just a rivalry that stems between him and Rocky. It is also their offspring as well, and, you know, the future. And I think that's why it has the edge on Rush. Rush, you have a rivalry in a certain moment of sporting history of this competition, but it doesn't really stem from that. This, in Rocky 4, it's a relationship that stems from that initial match, and, you know, even before that, with the death of Rocky's best friend, all the years in the future, to still having that rivalry there. When Ivan Drago shows up to Rocky's restaurant, it's a very vulnerable moment, and he's still talking shit and bringing stuff up about Apollo Creed's death. He's still rubbing that salt in the wound.
Tate?
Yep.
Go.
So you have the rivalry between a hero and a villain here in the Rocky film, and you have a unique rivalry in the fact that these two aren't villains. Both these two aren't villains. You don't have that general good versus bad, good versus evil. You can choose to be on James Hunt's side or Niki Lauda's side in that fight, or you can choose to sit on the middle. But you have that tension between you. And as an audience member, it gives you more to think about. It makes you think, well, shit, who's in the right here, who's in the wrong throughout the entire rivalry that plays out on screen. You have that as an actual thing that happened in the world and some people experience. This film has been waiting for years to go onto the big screen, and it is the one that people wanted to see of a rivalry within sport. These two titans of motorsport going up against each other and all the trials and tribulations they went through to get there. And you see it as a rivalry from both sides. You see James Hunt's life. You see all the lavish things that he does. You see Niki Lauda, all the struggles that he went through, the fact that he's able to pick up a substantial relationship and James Hunt isn't, and that plays on James Hunt's mind. You have the racing rivalry, you have the crashes on circuit, you have the whole race situation where the race was meant to be cancelled because Niki Lauda said it was too dangerous. People had died on that weekend, and he wanted it cancelled. He got injured because of that. He had a life-changing injury because of that, because James Hunt voted against it. With Rocky and Drago, you see it from Rocky's side. All Drago is, like Drago, from his perspective, it's another person to deck out onto the mat. With Rocky, it is personal. But from that other side, it isn't really. It's just another person to beat up. Niki Lauda.
Stop. Chris, 1 minute now.
Both sporting movies, and let's break down fundamentally what the end goal of this rivalry is. For Rush, essentially, like I know you've just mentioned there, you have like the interpersonal family stuff, like one's got this lavish lifestyle, the other one isn't, and he's got problems at home, whatever it happens to be. Ultimately, they're going for that. Who's the best racer? Who gets the trophy? Who gets the title? Rocky 4 goes beyond that. It's not just about boxing. It's about where these men stand, like the dignity, righting wrongs that have happened in the past. Yes, you have like who wins the boxing match, but inherently you don't care about that. Rocky doesn't care about that. He was doing it to avenge his friend and to make a statement. And then when we get into Creed 2, like you say that, you know, Drago doesn't have a character. I would argue that that's Drago's movie. That is the Drago's movie. You see the fallout of what's happened after that fight, the 30 years on, still just as bitter as ever. You get the impression that every waking day for 30 years, this guy has thought nothing about getting this rematch together, training his son up to avenge the people that he should have.
But with the Rocky films, he's had more than one rival. Throughout the entire series of films, he's had more than one person who he's had a beef with and had a fight with. And that continues throughout the entire films. Drago, for that one film, was the big bad. But you could also say Apollo Creed was his rival in the first film. You have that kind of thing where Rocky will always have a rival because it's a rivals film series. With Rush, this is it. These two are the only two people. They only have their eyes on each other on the track. They don't care about who else is on the track. It's these two. For this moment, it is just the World Championship on the line, everything at stake. Absolutely everything at stake within the film of Rush. And it comes down to the fact, and I will say this again, you have the characters motivated on by each other. They push each other further. They absolutely force each other to almost push themselves beyond the limit and beyond the track circuits, if you will pardon the pun, in that sense.
Stop.
With Rocky, it's another ring.
I thought you were just saying stop for the pun.
Oh, stop.
Puns must never be pardoned.
Well thought. Wow.
Well thought.
I don't know where I am. Is anybody?
You're on Battle of the Brackets, George.
Has
Because
anybody? Yeah, go first.
you won it for me on that last one with the rebuttal by saying that he will always have a rival.
And I would argue for every single one of those other rivals.
You are entering the argument for this one specifically.
And I did just then. Did you not see?
To be fair, it was good, but that rebuttal where he did say there will always be another one, there will always be someone who will go up against Rocky and be that rival for that film. True, it does have a sequel, but that's not really meant to be the focus of that. The focus is meant to be on Apollo Creed's son. And yeah, whilst with Rush, it is all condensed within that film and just how it does progress on with these two characters and how that dynamic does really change everything in that movie. So, shock horror, I'm giving it to Tayte.
Okay. Makes things interesting. So, Al or George, whoever wants to go next.
Al, have you?
I have not seen either, but I think Chris made a very good point by saying that fella turned up at Rocky's restaurant or whatever and was talking shit, and that about his mate who he punched to death or something. I thought that was a good point. But again, Tayte made a good point that there have been other rivals, and I'm thinking, well, shit, if there have been other rivals, does that really make it the top rival in history? Despite his mate dying, which is a fair point, I think I'm going to have to give it to Tayte because it's just one film about two blokes staring each other dead in the eye.
It's happened.
Shit. You've gone with that.
Shit about that Tayte hadn't won one in ages, and then he just comes back and just
Okay, so this is the last ever Battle of the Brackets. Thank you for watching. George, which way would you have gone anyway?
I would have actually gone with Chris.
Oh.
Tayte did well to speak about the rivals, but then I know it wasn't argued, so it's hard to compare. But I'm kind of there, like, well, I know Nicky Lauda was rivals with Alan Prost and
I know
many other drivers. But no,
we don't mention that. We don't mention that, George.
I would have gone with Chris. I thought when he brought up Drago that Creed 2 is essentially Drago's movie. That had a big impact on me because looking back, it really is. And there are those scenes that talk about Rocky being vulnerable at the restaurant when Drago comes back. When I first watched that, I thought, are they about to beat the shit into an old man? Because that's the vibe you get when his son walks in. But obviously, I love both of these films. My favorite sports film in history versus one of the best Rocky films. It was a very good battle.
I do want to go ahead and say the Rocky versus Drago, that is a phenomenal film rivalry. Absolutely.
It felt like when we did Best Villain, that, when we had Schindler's List, it was kind of like, here's the real life one. This is definitely a lot worse than yours because yours are all fake. I kind of got that vibe, and that Rush did look quite unstoppable because it is just such a magnificent film.
Remember when we had best sporting moment as well, and you had very serious documentary footage of people dying, and I think you went up against my training montage from Rocky 4. Oh,
And the trailing montage won.
that was a tough one.
Yeah,
But
no,
So-
it was a good battle.
It was.
Tate has finally won.
finally won. And I will
Yeah.
say this: when I came onto the call, and Chris will back me up on this, I said I am absolutely clueless on this bracket.
Yeah.
I have no chance. So,
because it's something new that none of us have done.
and hey, how does that work out for me? I feel like that's whenever we do something new, I tend
Because-
to do better.
Next
So
time,
we
do best chick flick, and then I can just beat you all. Then.
Oh come
I'll
on, no!
pick
I'd
Mean
fight you
Girls.
to the end on chick flicks.
It's on
Fight with me.
you beat there.
I'd pick Mean Girls as number one. By the way,
I
Clueless.
pick Mean Girls.
Mean
Cry.
Girls.
But we
Others that are better than Mean Girls, as much as I love Mean Girls.
do have the final bracket, which is Rush winning. It has thrown. It didn't even win Best Sports Moment, and I'm sure I had a couple of moments from it. I think it got far, but no, Rush is without doubt. If anybody,
Hang on, go back to your
I made a mistake. I can see it.
because you crossed out Rush, but then put it through.
Yeah, I just was in a quick. I was in a quick mode. That will be amended. But Rush is the winner. It has conquered all. Tate has won his second battle of the brackets out of
Finally.
22 we've done.
6-month rest did take some good.
Yes, it did. I'll tell you now.
He's
Welcome
come
to
back.
the Summer of Terror, where I win every battle.
Remember
of the bracket.
on the Facebook chat, Tate was like, "I really don't want to do this bracket."
Yeah,
and
I know.
he's won. But no, it was good to be back. I can't really fault the winners with that. It was probably the best final on paper.
Absolutely. It was good to do one of these again. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad we did another one, and hopefully we can get it a bit more regular as well. I know that people have been very vocal that they love Battle of the Brackets. Some say it's their favorite show on the channel, and I'm not going to disagree with that. It's a fantastic show, and it's fun to do. It's fun arguing movies. That's essentially where we all started this thing from, to bring it full circle. 4-year anniversary on the channel tomorrow. Yeah, it is. Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
4 years.
Jesus.
God damn.
That Age of Ultron review, damn.
That's audio review as well. Wow, I never want to go back and listen to some of those early audio ones.
Back and listen right now.
we are back tomorrow for the Game of Thrones review of the latest episode. So please tune into that. That will be at 6 o'clock. We hope.
Yep, we're shooting 6 p.m. on that one. Last of the Starks, episode 4. And that's probably going to be a very long stream because a lot went down in today's episode. But no, this was awesome. So thank you to everyone on the panel tonight. We've had Al, we've had Naomi, and of course, the trio, us, myself, Chris, George, and Tate. And we'll be on tomorrow. 4 years tomorrow. So this has sort of been our slightly premature celebration of 4 years on the channel, but Battle of the Brackets is here to stay, and we can hopefully get the next one out much sooner than 6 month time. I know we've had a lot of ideas about the next one, but we'll also take requests from you guys as well. Anyone watching, any comments, shoot us some ideas for future Battle of the Brackets episodes, and we'll take them all on board. So thank you to everyone who's been in the comments, and until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.